The Australian government's words are nothing but lies. They promised to build 1.2 million homes in 5 years, but how many have actually been built so far? The answer is that not a single state has met the target. In fact, New South Wales has only achieved half of its goal. The number of approvals is rising, and the figures look good, but construction starts are falling and very few homes are actually being built. The numbers for approvals, construction starts, and completions are all heading in different directions. Today, Jan is going to break down exactly what's going on. First, let's look at the fundamentals of supply. UDIA has released the latest housing index. On the demand side, there's a year-on-year increase of 7.1% and a month-on-month rise of 4.5%. But on the supply side, it's actually down 2.4% compared to the previous period. The overall housing index itself is 5% lower than the 10-year average and a full 13% lower than the peak in 2021. So how did these gaps come about? At the root of it all is population. The continuous influx of immigrants, work visa holders, and international students everywhere needs people to live. You can see that the surge in demand is extremely strong, up by 19%. So what's been happening with recent housing starts? They've dropped by 5.5% compared to the previous period. Every quarter, the number of people wanting to buy or rent homes keeps increasing, but the number of new houses being built is decreasing. The gap between supply and demand isn't shrinking, it's actually widening. And it's not just that there are more people, there's also more money. ABS data shows the average new Australian home loan is $750,000, while in New South Wales it's $873,000. In Queensland, the average loan rose by over $100,000 in 1 year. The 5% deposit scheme and 30% shared equity program brought 32,000 first-time buyers to market in 1 quarter, the most since early 2022. First home buyer loans rose 9.1% annually. More people are entering the market with higher leverage, banks are loosening lending, and the government is lowering the entry threshold, pushing overall debt levels to new highs. Money is pouring in, but the supply of houses isn't keeping up. So why doesn't the Australian government build more houses? Let's look at approvals first. In November, the number of approvals rose by 13% compared to the previous month, but in December, it immediately dropped by 15%. Overall, the number of approvals has only reached half of what it was during the pandemic. Getting approval doesn't mean construction starts, and starting construction doesn't mean completion. At every stage, the numbers keep decreasing. Currently, about 16,000 units are approved each month, but to meet the target of 1.2 million homes, the pace needs to be 20% higher than it is now. This is simply not keeping up. Looking at the construction period, 10 years ago, it took just over 8 months to build a detached house, but now it takes more than a year. For townhouses, the time has increased from 11 months to 16 months. It now takes nearly 40% more time to build the same house. Construction has slowed down and the cost issue still hasn't been resolved. The pandemic has caused the cost of building materials and labor to rise by more than 50% over the past 5 years. Although last year the rate of increase fell back to the normal range of 1 to 3%, notice that it's still growing. It hasn't gone down. And in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, the 3 major capital cities, the price per unit of land has almost doubled over the past 10 years. Profit margins are being squeezed, construction periods are getting longer, and a large number of small and medium-sized builders can't withstand the pressure. More and more are going bankrupt, and there are fewer and fewer people who can actually build houses. It's not that they don't want to build, it's that they really can't afford to. So after talking about all this, what does it actually mean for us ordinary people? The unfortunate reality is that whether you're looking to buy or rent, you're facing a market where supply keeps shrinking while demand is endlessly expanding. The longer you wait, the fiercer the competition becomes, and the higher the prices will get. I did a quick calculation. Based on today's supply gap and the current pace of new construction, the supply-demand imbalance won't be resolved within the next 5 years. Some people ask me when the Australian housing market will crash. Personally, I think it would only happen if immigration decreases, housing supply increases, and this situation lasts for at least 2 years. In that case, I would sell all my Australian properties. But in the foreseeable future, I really don't see that happening. Lastly, let's quickly look at interest rates. The Reserve Bank of Australia kept rates at a low 1.5% for a long time during the low interest cycle in 2017, then raised them sharply, reaching as high as 4.35%. Even though there were 3 rate cuts last year, overall rates are still at a high level. If interest rates remain high, people who can't afford to buy homes will turn to renting, which will further tighten the rental market and push rents even higher. Buying a home is expensive, and renting isn't cheap either. This structural issue of insufficient supply can't be solved just by some tax reform. The supply-demand gap is a fact, not just a prediction. So do you think the Australian housing market will continue to rise in the future? Leave a comment and let me know.